Welcome to Dyspraxic Rosie Writes, a channel where we talk about dyspraxia, chronic illness, and the writing life.
Today we're going to talk about the crucial and very important part of the creative process, especially for disabled viewers, of rest. And what that has truly meant for me as someone who has been doing a lot of different types of content creation since 2009, really. And I'll go into that more in a moment. It has been a really long time since I first got into content creation. Although I have only had this channel for only a short period of time, I decided I really wanted to start my own YouTube channel in August of 2025. But my history with content creation is something going quite far back. It's going all the way back to 2009 to be precise, just before I started university, to date my own age. And I started it because I think I knew on some level that I wanted to go into writing as a profession, and I was seeing the world really rapidly changing in terms of what that meant to be a writer. And I was seeing digital journalism grow really quickly. I was seeing Facebook become more and more of a popular medium. I was of the generation that grew up with MySpace. Some of my best discoveries in terms of music in my teens and early 20s were from being on MySpace and getting recommendations from friends. I was on Twitter starting in its early days. Although I'm not there anymore, so if you look me up now, you will have better luck finding me on Blue Sky. So really, I was a very early adopter, because the one thing I read really truly correctly is that the future is really digital in a lot of ways. The building of audience no longer just the traditional, like, being on the radio anymore, but also making something on your own terms as well, which really attracted me to content creation in a lot of ways. But the ways in which I have experimented with it over the years has changed really, really rapidly. I mean, I learned a bit of basic audio and video recording back in those university days, because I was taught how to use Audacity software, audio software, which is still around. Did many school projects on iMovie, which is also still around, back when I was a student. And I really realized that what attracted me to the concept of being a writer was not so much just the pure old school craft part, but I loved how much it was changing rapidly in terms of making media something that you can transform into something you do on your own terms. And I love the idea of learning a platform whenever it came along. I tried podcasting for a bit, although that wasn't really my thing. I found that I more so enjoyed being on other people's podcasts. I was a blogger originally because I saw that as my earliest gateway into building an audience. And the thing is, I felt a lot of pressure. I felt a lot of pressure to build something new, to build a new piece of content every single week. And that was honestly quite difficult for me. I think I was so eager to please and so eager to build an audience in the early days that I didn't really think about this in terms of what's realistic for me and my own well-being so much as just reaching as many people as possible. And it really took a long time for me to find that balance of rest and doing my own schedule and figuring out what's comfortable and all of that is somewhat necessary to not give up on this content creation thing before it's ever truly started. Where I eventually felt like rest was a crucial part of things, and factoring in rest time more specifically to my content creation process, however, was really when I started to finally accept and come to terms with exactly how my neurodivergence affected me. As a neurodivergent woman, I felt like I was masking for a really, really long time so much about who I am as a neurodivergent individual, and I endlessly felt that pressure to mask. And I felt like for a long time, especially throughout a lot of my 20s, I found myself constantly feeling the pressure to not listen to any instinct within my own body and mind of, oh, you pushed too hard at that social event and you're overwhelmed. I always was convinced that the true way to do it and get through and survive in my personal life, in any work, in any school environment, was to just keep pushing and to push beyond my own limits in an effort to try and keep up with everyone else's limits. And I think that bled over into many of the content creation efforts that I made. And really what it took was getting to a point where I felt really burnt out and like I wanted to give up. And I think it was really like around the time where I started to professionalize it more, where it started to be tied into the freelance work I was doing, that I really started to see that as a priority and see that the process of rest and the time where I'm not creating, I'm not thinking on my next idea, I am not trying to come up with some clever idea for a media outlet or whatever, is as much a part of the process as doing the actual content creation itself. And I think that's so important to acknowledge, especially in a really fast-paced world where the whole concept of being a freelancer is something in which people are endlessly pressuring you to hustle harder. And there's nothing wrong with a little bit of hard work, but especially when you're disabled, there is so much of an urgent priority to try and maintain rest a lot, because you need so much more rest in order to produce your best work, because really you're trying to get by in a world that is often inaccessible, and that can be very, very truly exhausting. And in order to be ready for tasks, especially creative tasks like writing or video content creation, you need your rest as much as possible, and that contributes to producing your best possible work. Really, in order to find that balance of rest and just doing the content creation itself, I found that I have really very much so resorted to keeping goals, having a goal of this day every week will be my video editing day. This day every week will be when I record videos. And whenever the consistent goal isn't realistic, changing up the timing in which I do it, and realizing that the really truly loyal audience that is worth winning over and worth creating valuable content for is the ones that will forgive, like the I'm sorry, you guys, I can't create content this week, or will be patient with you if you have to put off the whole thing for a couple weeks because you're in a crappy internet zone or something like that. So really, I think what we have to do is acknowledge that the most loyal and loving and supportive audiences you can possibly have will be the ones that won't suddenly wander off on you if suddenly these shortcomings that come from being both disabled and just straight up a human being make the process of creating your next thing of content unrealistic. Really, where I find that I create my best content is when I'm doing other things, and such is true for everything from my novel writing work to my freelance work for clients. And that is where rest plays a very meaningful role in things. the disability community saying on this, I have heard a lot, especially in energy limiting condition circles. So disabilities where limits on your energy are very much a factor, i.e. thyroid conditions, which I also have, and neurodivergence, which I also have. Although some may debate neurodivergence, but I would say that very much limits your environment create that energy limiting reality. And very much where this is very important, this thing of rest, is that often where I come up with my best ideas is if I'm watching another video, I'm reading a really interesting book, I just saw a really interesting movie that gets me thinking about a very specific concept. And that's why I carry around a lot of notebooks. That's why I love living in a modern age of smartphones where there's note-taking app you can put down just a few point form thoughts. And why I always have a pen with me historically. Because so many of the best ideas come when you're not really forcing them. When you're spending time in quiet and your most comfortable terms in general. So I think with our creative entrepreneurs in general, we need to encourage this act of rest a little bit more and see as much meeting the deadlines and meeting the responsibilities of the work itself. See the act of also resting and respecting boundaries as an essential part of the process itself. So how exactly do you prioritize rest as much as the work itself in your creative process? I would love to hear about that in the comments section. I know today's was a little rambly, but it was an idea that, once again, in the act of rest, I thought on that I very much wanted to take some time to reflect on, especially as the holidays start to be over, and especially as I explored in my previous video, I will link to that in the description as well, that very real instinct to the body to need rest, to have been shaken out of routines, to have experienced family pressure is very much always a part of things for people this time of year. So I very much, as you start to get back into your own creative process, I very much encourage you to see where this act of rest can be very realistic. And please excuse all the background noise. I still am with family for the holidays, so you might hear a little bit of the kitchen noise and people walking around, dog and things, but I'm sure that's something that is very much welcome for the viewers. Happy reading, happy writing, my friends. And if you enjoyed that video, subscribe, and share with someone who might find this kind of off-the-cuff thing about rest and creativity rather interesting.